Hello, everyone. Welcome to this Data Innovators Exchange session. Today, it's an introduction to driving real business growth with data analytics and AI. I'm James Hartright, a solutions partner at Ignition Data. And today, I have the pleasure of introducing someone who's doing some fascinating work at the intersection of business, technology, and data, Jean Kirchia. I hope I haven't mangled your name too much, Jean. Jan is the CTO of Nexus Data and co-inventor of the RAPPID value cycle, which we're going to talk a bit about today. First, in a series of webinars on realizing value from your data and the aligned processes with it. This session's a little bit of an introduction to the topic and a high-level overview of that aforementioned RAPPID value cycle. We'll follow that up if we have time, if Jean and I don't stop talking, with a few minutes of Q&A from any attendees. You should see in somewhere in there an area to drop comments and questions, so please post them in, and I'll pick out a few curly ones for Jean to answer at the end. Jean, welcome.
Good morning, everyone. Nice to be up about and early. It's 6 a.m. local time in South Africa this morning. Nice and brisk morning. So looking forward to this morning's conversation.
Sure, and hopefully a cup of coffee somewhere there.
Yeah, I've got some tea, so I'm ready.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. Where did RAPPID come from? And I've got it here. What drove you to write a book?
Sure. Yeah. No, so thanks for the question, James. So it's been a bit of a journey. I think myself and Carl got to a point where we got really frustrated with let's call it data leaders and the struggles that they face around not having budget, not having mandates, and really getting to a point where we had to do something. And one of those things was to write a book. It probably would have been a few other things as well. I think for those that know us also know that it was a bit of a therapeutic process as well, going through the motions and just putting pen to paper and understanding sort of the things that we've seen in our own careers, looking at what those gaps are, what the challenges are, the reasons why things are happening. And through all of this and noting it down, we got to the acronym of RAPPID. So for those that think we spelled RAPPID incorrectly, it's not. It's just the name of the framework. It's just abbreviation. And I think one of the best stories to perhaps explain the concept around RAPPID and the concept around data confidence is there's an old English word called spuddling, which effectively means is you're busy, but you're not adding any value. You're not actually doing anything. So busy work. And in the book, for those that haven't read it as well, you read the story about Carl visiting the Kruger National Park, and he decided to, let's call it a nosedive, into the pool and misjudged the depth of the pool by just a bit, and ended up hitting with diving nose first into a piece of concrete. And it being the national park and not probably having proper doctors and stuff, the local doctor at the park at that time had a look at him and said, "No, you look fine." Gave him a few pain tablets, sent him home. And the next morning when he woke up, his entire nose has collapsed. So it was proper damage was done. Wow. And then he ended up having to go to hospital, and a specialist surgeon then reconstructed his entire nose. So if you see Cole today, it's got a beautiful nose. For those that haven't seen it, it is the work of a master, right? So it wasn't born that way. But in the story for us, it's really the analogy of the doctor is really those type of people that they do stuff, but they're not necessarily a specialist in what they do. And they don't necessarily add the value that we expect them to do because they're not necessarily the experts. And this typically we find within the data world as well. You have a lot of data leaders that's spuddling, for lack of a better word.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And why do you think that the data leaders are struggling to get real results from their data process, things that help the business?
Yeah, I think the main reason is it's not understanding the concept of value and why we do things, right? So a lot of people get involved in chasing hype, chasing technology, and it's very difficult as a data leader. It's very, very difficult because there's new things that comes out every other day. AI has got so many permutations being launched every other week. there's flavors of the month. I think the last time I checked it was agentic AI, but I'm sure that has changed again. And they really struggle to sort of take that knowledge and bring it back to the business. And what happens is they focus so much on just solving problems and solving symptoms that they don't really address the root cause, but also not speaking back to value. And for us, we've seen that a lot of them struggle to deliver the results because of that. That's the first thing. Secondly is their peers, the rest of the C-suite, the rest of the senior leadership teams are not data confident. They don't have the confidence in asking the right questions, challenging decisions that's being made or investments that's being made. And because of this, it ends up sort of becoming a finger pointing exercise at the end of the day.
Okay. Yeah. And yeah, that stat there that you got up on screen, 80% of analytics and AI projects still fail to deliver outcomes. Yeah, that pinning back to those measures, yes, is an important part. So when you say measurable outcomes and results, what does that actually mean in reality? When, you know, if we're talking to data leaders to know, hey, you need to change, you need to refocus, what actually are we driving towards?
Yeah. So I think the first thing is to understand the reason why we're doing things and being able to measure that. And then the context and sort of the principle that we use in RAPPID is we start with what we refer to as value generating initiatives. So instead of starting with, you know, we want to build this AI model or we need to do this because somebody else has done it, we fundamentally look at why do we need to solve for the business, right? So business would typically have you know, KPIs or strategic objectives or directives that says we need to increase revenue by X within a certain segment for our business in order to survive, right? So it's something very clear from a business perspective. What we then do is we break that down and we say, what are the foundational things that you need to put in place in order to speak to that value, enable that value for that value case. Now, the realization that we saw and the reason why a lot of these projects actually fail is that the objective wasn't clear in the first place and the objective wasn't value. The objective was probably more than likely linked to let's enable something or let's do something, or we need this so that we can do X, Y, and Z, or we're implementing a new ERP and because of this, we need to have a data platform as an example.
Yeah.
And not really clearly thinking about what's the determinate business value that we'll get from making this investment. And once, or if they don't have that as their true North Star, whatever you want to call it, the problem is that they end up delivering something that doesn't really deliver value. And then we see the cycle where an investment gets made. 12 to 16 months later, the CFO says, listen, it's all good and well that we made this investment, we spent this money. I'm not seeing any return on this. I'm not seeing any business value from this. And what ends up happening is they then pull funding or they limit funding to a great extent. And then you end up losing talent, you lose the platform at the end of the day, or you just have a very clunky, very expensive thing that just sort of, it now becomes this appendage that you just need to live with, but it's not really adding any value to anyone's life at the end of the day.
Yeah. So, and taking that customer churn example, so would an example be, right, I've got my KPIs for churn, but I'm not actually working out what the drivers of those are. And so if it drops, there's no actionable change.
Yeah, I mean, churn is such a good example where, for instance, I mean, it's if you technically, let's call it, we're solving for churn, but if you're solving for churn, you're actually solving for, you know, revenue protection at the end of the day, right? So you want to protect the revenue that you're supposed to make and the customers that you already have on your books, because, you know, most companies, I'm not sure of all falls in this space, but it's almost always more expensive to onboard a new customer than it is to retain the existing ones.
Yeah.
So that's what you're really solving for from a value perspective. You're not just solving for churn, you're actually solving for a more complex business value component. But if we sort of take it a step further, is to say, but now that, you know, typically what would happen is like, let's build the churn model. Okay, cool, we build it. And then we get to business and we say, okay, well, now you have the churn model, you need to do something. And then they didn't think about what the next action or the next step is now that they have the churn model. Like, what do I now do with this analytics? So you've given them the actionable insight, but they're actually not delivering anything on it. And once you've passed the business chasm, then the next one is for IT, like now we need to implement something on the systems to operationalize this churn model to proactively retain customers. And then IT says, well, thank you for coming, but who's going to pay for this? You know, we've got so many other things on our radar that we need to focus on and that we need to prioritize. We need to do security updates and patches and quarterly releases. And you know, now you're coming with a very complex problem that we need to implement, and nobody's informed us about this. So you know, having all of